What happens when one of the most private music legends in the world dies without a will, and suddenly the question of his fortune depends on blood, family, and DNA? After Prince's death, fans expected tributes, concerts, purple lights, and memories. But behind the mourning, a colder story opened inside the court system. It was not only about songs or money. It was about who could prove they belonged to his bloodline, and whether one genetic test could change the future of a legendary estate. This was the mystery that made the case so unforgettable. Prince spent his life controlling his image, his sound, his name, and his music. Yet after death, the one thing he could no longer control was the legal battle around his inheritance. No known will was found. Claims began to appear. Lawyers searched for answers. And suddenly, Prince's own DNA became the key that could open or close the door to a fortune people believed could be worth hundreds of millions. The world had seen celebrity estates before, but this one felt different because Prince was different. He was not simply a performer. He was a symbol of ownership, secrecy, independence, and creative power. So when his estate entered probate court, the question was no longer just who loved him or who knew him. The question became much sharper. Who could prove a biological connection when everything was on the line? At first, fans were focused on the shock. Prince Rogers Nelson was gone at only 57 years old, and the world was trying to understand how a man so private, so controlled, and so fiercely protective of his art could vanish so suddenly. But then the legal system began asking a colder question. Did Prince leave a will? The answer was almost unbelievable. No known will was found. That missing document mattered because a will does more than distribute property. For a celebrity, it could protect artistic wishes, control unreleased work, guide family decisions, reduce conflict, and stop outsiders from using uncertainty as an opportunity. Without that document, the law had to step in and create order from silence. And when the law steps in, every relationship has to be measured, every claim has to be tested, and every possible heir becomes part of a public process. For an artist who fought record labels, guarded his masters, built Paisley Park, protected his image, and controlled almost every inch of his creative life, there appeared to be no clear written plan for what should happen after his death. And that one missing document opened a door that no one could close. Because when a superstar dies without a will, grief is only the beginning. The real battle begins in court. And in Prince's case, the court battle was not only about money. It was about identity. It was about family. It was about DNA. Reports at the time described a fortune that some headlines placed as high as hundreds of millions of dollars, sometimes up to 300 million, depending on the value placed on music rights, real estate, unreleased recordings, trademarks, and the legendary vault. Later, after years of legal fighting and tax disputes, the estate would be officially valued at a lower figure, but the early mystery felt enormous because Prince was not just a celebrity, he was an empire. His name, songs, image, performances, recordings, and hidden music archive were all part of the estate. And the moment the world learned there was no known will, the question became dangerous. What if Prince had a secret child? What if someone existed who could claim the entire estate? What if the next chapter of Prince's legacy was not written by music historians, but by a DNA test? That is where the story turns from celebrity news into a genetic mystery. And genetic mystery is the right phrase because the story was not about casual family gossip. A single confirmed child could have changed the entire inheritance structure. A proven biological heir could have affected control, money, music rights, negotiations, and the future of unreleased material. That possibility made every claim feel dangerous. It meant the estate could not simply rely on public reputation or family memory. It needed evidence that could survive court scrutiny. Because soon after Prince's death, the court authorized testing on a blood sample taken before his remains were cremated. That blood sample could be used to answer future paternity claims. In other words, Prince's own DNA became the gatekeeper to his fortune. The man who spent his life protecting his privacy was now, after death, being analyzed by the system he could no longer control. And then the claims began. One of the most widely reported was from Carlin Q. Williams, a man who claimed he was Prince's son and asked to be recognized as the sole surviving legal heir. If that claim had been proven, the entire estate battle could have changed overnight. Imagine that moment. A global icon dies without a will. A fortune is waiting. A vault of unreleased music sits behind the legend. Siblings, administrators, lawyers, and business partners are all watching. Then one man steps forward and says, "I am his son." That is the kind of claim that cannot be solved by emotion. It cannot be solved by fan opinion. It cannot be solved by resemblance, rumor, or memory. It has to be solved by science. DNA does not care about fame. It does not care about headlines. It does not care about who tells the better story. In a paternity case, DNA is the final witness, and in Prince's estate, the witness had the power to decide who could inherit a fortune. This is why the story shocked people. Because Prince had always seemed larger than ordinary rules. He was the artist who changed his name into a symbol, He was the man who wrote, produced, arranged, performed, and controlled his music with almost impossible independence. He was the star who turned privacy into a form of power. But in probate court, even Prince became part of a legal process. Files had to be opened, claims had to be checked, family lines had to be verified, DNA had to be tested. And for fans, it felt strange to watch. The same artist who built mystery around himself now had the most private question of all being handled in public. Was there a hidden heir? Was there a child no one knew about? Could a single genetic result rewrite the future of Prince's catalog? This is the hook that pulled the world into the case. But to understand why it mattered so much, we have to understand what Prince left behind. Prince did not leave only albums people already knew. He left music rights, real estate, branding power, business interests, and the legendary vault of unreleased songs. For decades, fans had heard stories about his vault at Paisley Park. Some believed there were enough recordings to release Prince music for years. Others imagined demos, alternate versions, concert recordings, unfinished projects, and experiments no one had heard. So the estate was not only money, it was a future music machine. Whoever controlled it would help decide how the world remembered Prince. Would the vault be opened carefully? Would unreleased songs be protected? Would the brand stay true to Prince's vision? Would his image be used too much, too fast, or in ways he would never have approved? These questions made the inheritance battle feel bigger than a bank account. It was about control of a legend. And because there was no known will, the law had to decide what Prince himself had not written down. In Minnesota, when someone dies without a will, inheritance follows intestacy rules. That means the estate passes according to family relationships defined by law. If Prince had a surviving child, that child could have had a powerful claim. If there was no child, the estate could go to siblings and other relatives. So a paternity claim was not a small detail. It could change everything. That is why the blood sample mattered. It was not just medical evidence, it was the genetic lock on the estate. Every claimant had to face it. And this is where the drama becomes almost cinematic. Prince was cremated. But before that, a blood sample connected to the autopsy process existed. The court allowed that sample to be used for genetic testing. The test could answer a question that no interview, no rumor, and no family story could prove. Was a claimant biologically related to Prince as a child? For a moment, it seemed possible that the story of Prince's estate might become one of the most shocking heir revelations in music history. A secret son, a hidden bloodline, a fortune changing hands, a vault of music redirected by one DNA result. But the result did not give the tabloid ending people expected. Reports said the DNA test showed Carlin Q. Williams was not Prince's son. That finding meant he was not entitled to inherit the fortune through that claim. And with that, one of the biggest early mysteries collapsed. But the larger story did not end, because the DNA test did more than reject one claim. It showed how every secret heir story around Prince would have to pass through science. The estate could not be claimed by a dramatic statement. It had to be proven by genetic truth. That is what makes the case perfect for hidden DNA. It shows the real power of DNA outside a laboratory. DNA can reach into a celebrity estate. It can silence a rumor. It can close a legal door. It can protect an inheritance. It can reveal a relationship or destroy a claim within seconds. And in Prince's case, DNA became the invisible judge standing behind the courtroom. But the most surprising part of the story is not only the claim, it is the contrast. Prince spent his life controlling his music more carefully than almost anyone in the industry. He fought for ownership. He challenged record companies. He warned artists about contracts. He understood the value of masters, publishing, branding, and independence. He knew the business side of music was a battlefield. Yet when he died, the absence of a known will created exactly the kind of chaos he had spent his career trying to avoid. That is the painful irony. The artist who controlled his sound did not leave the world with a clear map for his estate. And because there was no map, everyone had to enter the maze. Family members waited. Lawyers argued. Administrators managed assets. Tax authorities challenged valuations. Companies became involved. Potential heirs came forward. And fans watched as Prince's private world became a public legal puzzle. This is where the story becomes bigger than Prince. Because celebrity estates are not ordinary estates. A normal person may leave a house, savings, and personal belongings. A superstar leaves a brand. They leave image rights, song royalties, licensing power, unreleased material, film footage, trademarks, merchandise, and cultural value that can grow even after death. The person is gone, but the business continues. And when there is no will, the business does not pause for grief. It moves into court. Prince's estate became one of the clearest examples of how dangerous an unclear legacy can become. The legal process lasted for years. The valuation itself became a battle. The estate was at one point valued differently by the administrator and the IRS, leading to a major dispute before a final accepted valuation was reached years later. That means the question was not simply who inherits. It was also what exactly are they inheriting? How much is a song worth? How much is an unreleased recording worth? How much is a name worth? How much is a cultural icon worth after death? These questions do not have easy answers. A house can be appraised, a bank account can be counted, but Prince's vault, Prince's publishing, Prince's future licensing value, that is where art becomes almost impossible to measure. And while that fight was happening, DNA remained one of the few tools that could answer at least one part clearly. Who belonged to the family line? Who did not? This is why the secret heir angle was so powerful. A fortune can be argued over for years, but a paternity test can change the direction of the case in a single result. For the public, that creates irresistible tension, because everyone understands the emotional side of a secret child story. If true, it would be shocking. If false, it would be dramatic. Either way, the DNA test becomes the moment of truth. But the Prince case also shows why these stories must be handled carefully. A claim is not proof. A headline is not evidence. And a person who says they are related to a celebrity still has to meet the standards of law and science. That matters because celebrity deaths attract rumors. When a famous person leaves money behind, claims can appear from everywhere. Some may come from confusion. Some may come from family stories passed down for years. Some may come from people who sincerely believe something they were told. Some may come from opportunism. The court cannot judge those claims by vibes. It needs evidence. And DNA evidence can cut through decades of rumor with brutal clarity. That is what happened here. The secret heir narrative promised a shocking twist. The DNA test delivered a legal answer. And after the claims were handled, the court eventually confirmed Prince's 6 siblings as heirs. His sister Tyka Nelson and 5 half-siblings were declared lawful heirs under the intestacy process. That ruling gave the estate a defined family structure. But it did not erase the drama, because by then, the public had already seen how close the story came to being rewritten. One positive DNA test could have changed everything. One verified child could have shifted the inheritance away from siblings. One biological link could have changed who controlled part of Prince's legacy. That is why this case still matters years later. It is not because the secret son claim was proven. It was not. It matters because the case showed how fragile celebrity legacy can be when paperwork is missing. A man can build a career for 40 years. He can sell millions of records. He can influence generations of artists. He can fight to own his masters. He can create a vault of music that fans dream about. But if he dies without a clear estate plan, the future of all of it may depend on court orders, tax disputes, family claims, and DNA testing. That is the hidden truth inside Prince's estate. The case also showed how modern fame creates a new kind of inheritance. In the past, a person might leave land, jewelry, or physical possessions, but an artist like Prince leaves something that keeps generating value. Recordings, publishing rights, licensing deals, documentary interest, museum traffic, merchandise, streaming revenue, and the emotional attachment of millions of fans. That kind of estate can grow after death, which makes the question of control even more important. The heirs are not just receiving assets. They're receiving responsibility for a cultural memory. The mystery was not only about who might be related to him, the deeper mystery was how someone so careful with his art left his inheritance exposed to uncertainty. And maybe that is why the story still feels haunting. Prince was famous for saying that artists should own their work. He understood that control was freedom, but death creates a different kind of control question. Who controls the work when the artist is gone? Who decides what the world gets to hear? Who decides what stays hidden? Who decides how the name is used? Who decides what the legacy means? Without a will, the law must answer. Without a trust, administrators must manage. Without written instructions, relatives and companies may disagree. And without DNA, claims of bloodline can become endless. That is why the court's decision to preserve and test Prince's blood sample was so important. It protected the estate from uncertainty. It gave the legal system a way to test claims instead of drowning in them. It turned biology into a filter. Only a real genetic connection could survive. For fans, the situation was uncomfortable because it exposed the human side of an icon who seemed almost mythological. Prince was not supposed to be ordinary. He did not move through the world like ordinary people. His clothes, his stage presence, his guitar playing, his voice, his attitude, his silence, his interviews, everything felt designed to remain unforgettable. But probate court does not care about myth. It cares about documents. It cares about relatives. It cares about signatures. It cares about blood. That is what makes the story so powerful. The legend met the paperwork. The myth met the statute. The symbol met the sample. And in that clash, DNA became more powerful than celebrity. The public often imagines DNA as something connected to crime scenes or ancestry kits. But this case shows another world. DNA can decide inheritance. DNA can determine legal parentage. DNA can protect an estate from false claims. DNA can decide whether a person becomes an heir or walks away with nothing. That is a life-changing difference. In Prince's case, it was potentially a fortune-changing difference. The phrase secret heirs sounds like entertainment. But behind it were real people, real law, real grief, and real consequences. For the siblings who were eventually confirmed as heirs, the process meant wading through claims and legal delays. For claimants, it meant putting their personal story against science. For fans, it meant watching the private aftermath of a legend's death become public. And for the estate, it meant trying to preserve value while the legal process moved slowly. That is another hidden cost of dying without a will. Time becomes expensive. Every delay can create legal fees. Every dispute can slow decisions. Every uncertainty can affect licensing, releases, management, and taxes. A fortune can shrink while people fight over it. That is why estate planning is not only for billionaires. It is a way to prevent confusion. Prince's case became a warning to artists everywhere. Own your masters, yes. Control your brand, yes. Protect your music, yes. But also protect the future of those things after you're gone. Because silence can become a courtroom. And if you do not leave instructions, the system writes them for you. Still, there is one more emotional layer to this story. Prince's fans did not want to think about him as an estate. They wanted to remember the music. Purple Rain, When Doves Cry, Kiss, Sign of the Times. The guitar solos, the Super Bowl performance, the impossible charisma. They wanted the magic. But after death, magic becomes property. Songs become assets, a name becomes a trademark, a vault becomes inventory, a home becomes a museum, and a blood sample becomes evidence. That transformation is painful because it shows what celebrity really is after the person is gone. It is memory, yes, but it is also business. And DNA became one of the few things that could keep that business from being captured by an unproven claim. In the end, the Prince secret heir story did not reveal a hidden child. It revealed something else. It revealed how quickly an empire can become vulnerable. It revealed how powerful DNA has become in modern inheritance battles. It revealed how a missing will can turn mourning into years of legal conflict. And it revealed that even the most private star cannot control the questions that come after death without a plan. So when people ask why Prince's estate still fascinates so many years later, the answer is not only money, it is the mystery of control. Prince controlled his art and life, but after death, courts, administrators, heirs, tax authorities, companies, and DNA tests entered the story. That is the part fans never expected. The final guardian of Prince's fortune was not a song. It was not a lawyer. It was not a vault. It was a genetic sample, a drop of evidence preserved before cremation, a biological signature that could confirm or deny anyone who tried to step forward as blood. And in one of the most dramatic celebrity estate cases of modern music, DNA did what no rumor could do. It drew the line. On one side were verified heirs. On the other side were unproven claims. And behind both sides stood the legacy of a man whose music still sounds alive. Maybe that is the final irony. Prince spent his life making art that felt beyond time, but the fight over his estate was deeply earthly. Paperwork, courtrooms, taxes, samples, claims, deadlines. He was a symbol to fans, but the law had to treat him as a person who died without a will. That is what made the case so shocking. The legend became human, the private man became public evidence, and the fortune almost became a genetic mystery. The secret heirs may not have changed the final outcome, but the DNA test changed the way people understood the case. It proved that Prince's estate would not be decided by the loudest story. It would be decided by law, evidence, and blood. And that is why this story still feels like a warning written in purple light. A superstar can control the stage, a superstar can control the sound, a superstar can control the image. But without a will, even a superstar cannot control what happens next. Because after the final song fades, the world does not only ask what you created, it asks who owns it. It asks who inherits it. It asks who can prove they belong. And sometimes the answer is hidden not in a vault, not in a contract, and not in a family story. Sometimes it is hidden in DNA. That is the real secret behind Prince's estate. Not a confirmed secret child, not a Hollywood-style twist, but the chilling truth that one genetic test had the power to shake a fortune, protect a legacy, and decide who could step into the future of one of music's greatest names. Prince left the world with songs that may never die, but his estate left the world with a lesson that every artist should hear. Your legacy is not only what you create, your legacy is also what you leave written down. And when nothing is written, DNA may become the loudest voice in the room. There is one more reason the Prince case deserves attention. It shows that a person's public genius does not automatically protect their private affairs. Fans often assume that someone surrounded by managers, accountants, lawyers, and advisors must have every legal detail handled. But celebrity life can create the opposite problem. So many people are involved in business decisions that the most personal decision, the question of who should inherit and how, can still remain unfinished. That is why the paternity claims became such a powerful symbol. They were not only legal claims, they were evidence that uncertainty creates openings. When there is no clear will, the law has to invite proof. It has to examine relationships. It has to decide whether someone belongs inside the family tree. And when money, fame, and emotional history are involved, every open door becomes a magnet for conflict. Prince's case also reminds us that DNA is not magic, but it is one of the strongest tools modern courts have for biological questions. It cannot reveal what Prince wanted emotionally. It cannot say whether he had private conversations, unspoken wishes, or personal feelings about different relatives. But when someone claims to be a child, DNA can test the biological foundation of that claim. In a case where millions of dollars and cultural history are at stake, that clarity matters. And that is why this DNA story still feels powerful today.